I'm Jillian Beaudry, here to talk to you about what caused the terrible time of the Great Depression. History remembers the 1920s as a decade of bull markets and new opportunities, but by September 3, 1929, the surging economy was on the verge of a financial collapse. A healthy economy needs more people to buy more products, resulting in more wealth and success, but money was unevenly distributed in the 1920s, leading to an uncertain future for our economy. The Roaring Twenties had been a Republican decade.
While wages rose gradually, worker productivity vastly increased. Between 1923 and 1929, the output per person per hour jumped 32%, but workers' wages inched up only 8%. Also, corporate profits from worker output skyrocketed 65%. This shows that the rich were simply getting richer while industrial workers were getting less poor. More than 60% of all American families received yearly incomes of $2,000. 24,000 of the country's wealthiest families enjoyed an annual income of $100,000, which is 50 times more what most families were receiving. Soaring stock prices made rich people richer and concentrated more wealth into fewer hands. While a stream of new products and buyer-friendly payment plans were introduced, consumers purchased goods on credit, piling up huge debts. It started to become very clear that too much money was being poured into stock market speculation. On September 3, 1929, the stock market began to sputter and fall. After the Dow Jones average dropped 21 points in 1 hour on October 23rd, many investors made the conclusion that the stock market boom was over. Now on to Bella Caterina with the hardships of the Great Depression and more after this quick break.
Thanks, Jill. Hi, I'm Bella with the effects of the Great Depression. First off, we have the stock market crashing. The stock market was a system that people put a lot of their money into, buying stocks and partially buying stocks. The stock market crashed in 1929, making people get less money than they invested into the stocks. Some people had borrowed money to buy a stock and couldn't repay the loans because of the crashing. Another big scare was the bank failures. The banks stopped funding people when times got tough, making people left with no money. Many banks went bankrupt. Because of this scare and quick shutdowns, the whole nation's banking system almost collapsed. At times, there were too many poor people. In 1929, only a few families had a good amount of money. 40% of families in the country were still living at or below the poverty level. People were too poor to buy food and to pay their debts. Since people couldn't pay to get food, markets weren't making money. Therefore, they did not have enough money to pay for other people. Also, farm failures. Americans were already facing tough times with farming because the crops were too expensive, so many farmers had to burn corn for fuel instead of selling it. Then there was environmental disasters. A very big drought occurred, causing dry winds to pick up sand and blow it across the prairies. This was known as the Dust Bowl. The dry winds created huge suffocating clouds of dirt that buried towns and turned farms into deserts. Some government inaction, many people didn't have jobs. During this time, it wasn't unusual for 2,000 or 3,000 applicants to show up 1 or 2 job openings. Bread lines were set up to prevent people from dying. More than 1 million families lost their houses. Some towns were made up in tents and shacks. Because of the lack of money, these towns were called Hoovervilles.
Political cartoon, President Roosevelt is giving President Hoover a baby, which symbolizes our country. And the baby has war debts, budget problems, economy measures, farm problems, bank problems, unemployment, and President Roosevelt feels that this baby is President Hoover's now, so he has to deal with all the issues that come with our country because he's now the president.
Thank you, Bella. Now let's talk about sports. In 1920, the National Football League was formed on August 20th. During the same year, Babe Ruth was sold to the New York Yankees, where he hit 54 home runs. Also, the Cleveland Indians shortstop Ray Chapman was killed after being hit by a pitch thrown by Carl Mays of the New York Yankees. The wild pitch hit Chapman in the head, causing him to pass 12 hours later. In 1924, the world participated in the first Winter Olympic Games. In the Summer Olympics, Paavo Nurmi wins 5 gold medals in athletics for track and field, representing Finland. The French Open in tennis was open to non-French players for the first time, and the first handball international match was held between Germany and Belgium in 1925. In 1926, Jack Dempsey loses his world boxing title to Jean Tooney, and Gertrude Elderly becomes the first woman to swim the English Channel. In 1928, the Women's Olympics, athletics, and gymnastics are held for the first time, and in the same year, William Ralph Dixie Dean scores 60 goals in 39 matches as Everton Football Club wins the league. Today's segment was in memory of Ray Chapman. Now on to Ashley to tell us about President Hoover.
Thank you, Alyssa. I am Ashley Nicholson.
I'm Abby, and here to talk about President Hoover and his response to the Great Depression.
President Hoover was not the cause of the Great Depression, though many Americans looked to him to solve the crisis. As the situation grew worse, Hoover tried different approaches, but in the end, he failed to find the right way to stop it. President Hoover stated publicly that the government should not support the people. Hoover believed in rugged individualism where the people rescue themselves by their own efforts.
For a while, he refused to accept that the economic crisis was so widespread that people could not help themselves, no matter how much they wanted to. When his response fails, he asked businesses to keep wages, employment, and all prices at the current level. Hoover called for tax cuts, lower interest rates, and asked wealthy people to donate more to.
The plan was to put more money in the hands of businesses and individuals to encourage more production and consumption. Eventually, between the public, the newspaper reports, and his advisors, Hoover was reluctantly convinced to take steps to help the needy. His administration spent hundreds of millions of dollars on public projects. This idea was for all Americans to voluntarily join forces to combat the Depression.
The Federal Farm Board loaned farmers money and bought their surplus crops that no one else could afford. However, these policies did not go far enough to help those who needed it most, and economic conditions did not improve. The unemployment rates increased, charities ran low on money, and the government could no longer support their depression.
As this approach failed, President Hoover decided to reverse the course and use federal resources to help the Depression. In 1932, Congress created the Reconstruction Finance Corporation, which gave more than $1 billion to the government loans to railroads and large businesses. Eventually, as the RFC lent out billions, the bankers did not increase the loans to businesses, and the business did not use the loans to hire more workers. The Secretary of Commerce then called for the construction of a dam on the Colorado River. This job brought much-needed employment to the Southwest during the 1930s.
During these times, Americans protested the failures of Hoover, so at the next presidential election, Hoover lost to Roosevelt, who promised Americans a New Deal. Thank you for watching the Great Depression Chat.
I should go from this side, right?
Yeah.
Wait. Should I start from the beginning?
Yeah.
There's a ladybug in my sleeve.
Yeah, really? That's disgusting.
I saw it crawling and I got scared.
He drops the ball and they don't block it, but then we run it back for a touchdown.
Your dad's talking in the background.
I can't do that.
Thank you, Bella. Now let's talk about sports. In 1920, the National Football League was formed on August 20th. During the same year, Stop it, Andrew! Don't!
Oh my god, that was so good!
You peeped your head!
Stop!
I am Ashley Nicholson.
And I am.
Alright, really?
Wait, we can't.
In 1928, the Women's Olympics. In 1928, the Women's Olympics, athletics, and gymnastics are held the first time. In the same year, hold on, that literally makes absolutely no sense. Gymnastics are held for the first time, and in the same year, William Ralph Dixie. Oh my god, I got this. Okay. In 1928, the Women's Olympics. Oh my god, this is a really hard sentence. The Women's Olympics, athletics, gymnastics. Okay. In 19...
Gertrude Elderly becomes the first woman to swim the English Channel. This is so bad. Oh my god, I'm just gonna keep going. In 1928,
He was screwed from the get-go.